Morning, everyone. It is lovely to be in sunny Helsinki. Have you seen it outside? It's like 25 degrees out there. Is it always like this? Yeah? It's amazing. I also love that we're at an event talking about media, and we've got little ad breaks for the broadcasters in between the content. You guys know what you're doing, right? I think we've done this before. Right, so I am here to talk about the hottest topic in media, beginning with an A. No, I'm not talking about AI. That's for a different conference. We are talking about attention. So I think Richard Marks had talked a little bit about attention earlier on. He sort of set me up quite nicely. And I think, yeah, it's one of those subjects that has really found the limelight in terms of the trade coverage that we've seen, and we've seen a lot of investment moving into this space. We've got lots of businesses that are investing in it. We've got Karen Nelson Field from Australia. We have got companies like Lumen and companies like T-Vision that are setting up panels for measurement, and we're talking about how we can use this new measure as a way to optimize our media plans, to find more efficient solutions, and change the way that we do things. But I think it's important for us to remember where attention came from, and that attention was born out of the online world. It was created because we know that online impressions don't necessarily translate to actual effectiveness in the same way that measures for traditional media channels do. In terms of when you're measuring TV reach or out-of-home footfall, we tend to know that those translate to effectiveness. When we looked at measures for online, because of all the problems that online tends to have in terms of viewability, about the volume of clutter that's on screen, we needed to introduce this new metric of attention to help us understand where the value was. But now we're seeing that this measure is moving from the online world into the world of TV. We've got TV panels where we're looking at when people are looking at the ads versus when they're not looking at the ads, and we can start to optimize our media plans around this. So it was something that, as the trade body for TV, we wanted to spend a bit of time understanding, how good is this measure? How useful is this measure going to be in terms of helping us understand the effectiveness of TV? So what's the data show us so far? Well, certainly the studies that have been done show that there is a strong relationship between when people are looking at advertising and the short-term sales effects that generates. So the longer people look at advertising, then the more likely that is to drive a higher short-term sales effect. And we've seen that from both studies by Karen Nelson Field, but also Google have done similar studies and seen similar kinds of results. We've also seen from the Lumen T-Vision data that this data is showing that TV is an absolute attention bargain. This chart is looking at the cost per second of visual attention. So basically, the lower the cost, the better value for money it is. And you can see TV there on the left-hand side, 30-second spot, is one of the most cost-effective formats. And we can see when we compare it to the likes of sort of Facebook, in-feed mobile, that's much more expensive because people are sort of scrolling past at speed and they're not spending a huge amount of time. So far, so good. This looks like it's a really important measure and that we should be sort of jumping in and using it to optimize our plans. Well, I think perhaps it's a bit too good to be true, and I think there are some things that we need to be considering when we're using attention measures like this. I think the first thing is that we've got to remember that this is born out of the digital world. So do these measures translate across from online display into TV or into the radio or into out of home? Also, I think we need to think about the fact that when we're talking about TV, we're talking about audio-visual advertising. Don't forget the audio part of that equation. That advertising is not just something you want people to look at, it's something you want people to hear as well. And by using methodologies that simply observe when people are looking at the advertising and not take into account when people are actually listening to the advertising or hearing the advertising, does that mean that we're undervaluing the impact of that advertising? And then the third point that I think we need to consider is that there is a theory that advertising actually works best when we're not paying attention to it. That this is how it can creep into our subconscious and prime us in a way from a long-term point of view to consider this brand, to remember this brand, to know about this brand without necessarily being cognitively aware of it. So in order to sort of evaluate some of these areas, we worked with this fella. He's Ali Good. He is a academic who works in the world of marketing. And you can probably tell that by looking at him. Have you ever seen a better branded academic? You can just tell he's from the world of academia, can't you? So he wrote this white paper for us, looking at the world of attention and trying to build an understanding of how we should be considering attention from an advertising point of view using academic research. Now, this white paper has been translated into Finnish, so if you go to Screenforce, you can get yourself a copy, and everything I'm talking about today is going to be covered off in this white paper. So as a part of this study, we also spoke to specialists in the academic world, people who sort of live and breathe, understanding how we pay attention to things from an academic point of view. So we've got Professor Anil Seth, who's a cognitive neuroscientist from Sussex University, and we also spoke to Professor Maria Chait, who specialises in oral attention, and she works at the Ear Institute and the University College of London as well. So we spoke to both these two just to understand the academic viewpoint of attention. So what is the academic viewpoint and how does that differ to what we've been looking at? So as mentioned before, from a commercial point of view, in the world of media, the way that we are measuring attention is simply by the sensory input, and we're using that in terms of where people are looking. So we're assuming that when people are looking at something, therefore they are paying attention to it. And when they're not looking at something, they are not paying attention to it. The academic world takes a very different point of view, and it thinks about attention in terms of three things. So number one, it thinks about the actual processing and encoding of information, how we do that and how that information comes into us, how we store that information, so how that information goes into our longer-term memories, but then also, crucially, retrieval. How do we retrieve that information at a point that's going to be important to us in the purchase cycle? So here is Professor Seth Anil, and he's just given us an overview as his views on attention.
There's this quite dominant idea of attention, that it's a bit like a spotlight, that we open our eyes and there's this whole world around us, and then we pick out one particular element of that through attention. It's the spotlight of attention, and whatever that spotlight is shining on, that's what comes to our awareness, and that's what we think about, that's what we make decisions based on, and that's the thing to really, really care about. Now, this has been an attractive metaphor in neuroscience for decades, but it's wrong. Attention just doesn't work that way. It's much more complicated.
Okay, so Professor Anil Seth is saying, no, it's not what you're looking at. Attention is not what you're looking at. It's more complicated than that. There's more to it than that. But surely that doesn't make sense. If you're looking at me, surely you're paying attention to me right now. If you're looking at something, you must be paying attention to it, right? Well, let me see if I can demonstrate that this isn't the case. Now, I really want you to pay attention to the screen. Try and keep your eyes on it. Don't drift away. Watch what you're seeing.
To test just how much attention the attention-stealing design of the new Skoda Fabia actually steals, we left one parked on this ordinary road in West London. We wanted to see if its sharp crystalline shapes, bold lines, and lower, wider profile would attract the desired level of attention. Will the 17-inch black alloy wheels stop passers-by in their tracks? Will the angular headlights attract the attention of other road users? Will a crowd gather to check out its fresh, sporty look? Well, not quite. But did the attention-stealing design distract you from noticing that the entire street has been changing right before your very eyes? Don't believe us? Have another look. Did you spot the van changing to a taxi? How about the scooter changing to a pair of bicycles? Or the lady holding a pig? Let alone the fact that the entire street is now completely different. Didn't think so. So there we have it. proof that the new Skoda Fabia is truly attention stealing.
It's great, isn't it? Well, number one, it's a great ad. I think that will score quite well on the star rating system. It tells a story, draws you in. But it makes a really good point, doesn't it? You can be staring right at something and not necessarily noticing what's going on. So this is a phenomenon called inattention blindness. And I've experienced it myself. We just got a new office, and we've been slowly decorating it. And one morning I came into the office, and my colleague said to me, "Oh, what do you think of the new Thinkbox logo?" And I said, "What Thinkbox logo?" And basically, we'd had this massive neon Thinkbox logo installed at the front of our office building as we came in across some glass panels. And I just came in, I walked right past it, and I didn't notice it. And it's when we're in these sort of routines, when we know what we think we should be expecting, we can be looking at stuff, and it goes well beyond what we're actually cognitively aware of, what we're actually processing, what's going into our memories. If we can't use where we're looking as a proxy for attention, or if we need to be careful about that proxy, what are the things that we need to be thinking about from an academic point of view when it comes to attention? And so there's three things. So how does attention sort of move around the environment? How do we process that? How do we select what we pay attention to? And then how do we divide our attention across our senses? These are three areas that we need to think about. So the number one, how does attention move around our environment? The main rule of thinking around this is that there's just sort of two ways in which we can pay attention to things. There's top-down attention and there's bottom-up attention. So top-down attention is basically when we're choosing what we're going to be paying attention to, and bottom-up attention is when something in our environment draws our attention away from what we're currently doing. So if you think about it from this point of view, so this is the one on the left. This is your top-down attention. If you're riding a bike, and I don't know if riding a bike in Helsinki is the same as riding a bike in London, but you need to be watching out for that bus, because that bus does not give a shit about you. So you're moving around, you're looking, you're avoiding, you're steering, you're paying attention to your environment. And then the bottom-up attention is if something happens, like if you hear a car horn, or if you hear screech of tires, that's going to move your attention away. So those are the two ways that we pay attention. And I think especially, coming back to what we've been talking about, what Tom was talking about earlier, about sort of brand and activation, this is quite interesting from the way that we operate across those two environments. Activation advertising is much more playing on the top-down type of attention. It's when we're in market for something, we're going to be actively seeking out, we're going to be looking for information about that product, we're going to be looking for offers and deals, we're going to be interested in finding things out. When we're trying to build brand, you've got to capture people's attention. You need to find a way of drawing their attention, and so you need to use creativity, you need to tell stories, you need to find a way. So I think it's quite interesting, there's these parallels in how we pay attention to the parallels of how we actually, the creative way that we are trying to attract attention. The other area that is really, really interesting is around attention is perceptual load theory. And this is about the degree to which we can pay attention to things and how distracted we become, and our ability to multitask. So if you think about our attention being a sort of glass that's getting filled up with water, there are certain things that you can do at the same time that aren't going to be a problem. So for example, it's possible for us to be listening to music and to drive a car at the same time. We have enough cognitive processing power to be able to do those two tasks. What we can't do is use a mobile phone and drive a car at the same time, because that's taking up too much of our cognitive processing power, and we start to fall over. And that's why using the mobile phone when you're driving a car is illegal. And I think when we think about media usage and when we're consuming media, we're using different types of perceptual loads. We've got different types of distractions. And this is an area that we're doing some research into currently, is to understand the degree to which our perceptual load changes doing different tasks while we're watching TV, and the impact that would have on our ability to pay attention to the advertising. So what does this all mean in terms of the world of TV? Well, to bring this back to TV, there was a study that we were able to borrow from one of the broadcasters back in the UK, where they'd spent quite a bit of time doing ethnographic research. So it was 64 different households. They set up virtual reality, sort of 360-degree cameras in their homes. And it's I don't know if you've got a show called Gogglebox or something similar to that over here. So it's basically watching people watch TV. And we're filming them, and then we're starting to record what they're doing. And the people who did this study, they looked at all the points in time when the adverts are on, and they started to code up their behavior in terms of were they paying full attention to the ads, were they looking at their phones and doing something, was somebody talking to them at the same time, and it allowed us to draw a picture across a fairly large sample of the degree and the different types of behaviors that we can see going on. So this is how it breaks down, and we're going to talk about it in terms of this pie chart here. But what we can see, the top line level, was that 83% of the time that people were paying some kind of attention to the advertising. That the rest of the time, they either weren't in the room, they were present, but they were completely being distracted, and then the rest of the time they were fast-forwarding the ads. So in the UK, and I think it's the same in Finland, is that if somebody's not in the room, they are not being measured, they're not being counted, so that doesn't get charged for. If somebody is fast-forwarding the ads, that doesn't get charged for. So we can take those aspects, and in terms of the ads that you're being charged for as advertisers, there's basically, we know that the majority of the time there is some level of attention being paid. If we start to break it down further, here we can see the degree to which that we've got very, very high attention. So 22% of the time, people are paying full high attention. They're watching the ads. They're listening to the ads. So it's, 1 in 5 ads have full attention, which, when you think about it, is pretty impressive. The other thing that I think is really significant here is that 7% of the time, people are actually talking about the ads. It's a pizza ad. They're going, "Oh, I fancy a pizza." It's a travel ad. They're thinking, "Oh, I'd like to go on holiday." Just think of that. That's almost like 1 in 15 times, 1 in 15 ads. People are actually talking about the ad. They're conversing about it, and it talks to the power of TV, the importance of that shared environment to create conversation and amplify the effect of the advertising. Here we have where the ads are being part watched, or there's a mixture of auditory or visual distractions. So either they're being distracted by something like a phone or somebody's chatting to them. And then this part here is when it's just full-on auditory distraction. So they're eyes on, but there's something that's distracting them from paying full attention. So let me play this video that shows you an example of what this looks like.
I used to watch, my mum used to watch EastEnders, there's Tiffany in it, and her real name's Martine McCutcheon. I wanted to call myself Martine. I was like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't have that choice. Imagine if I didn't know it. I'm sorry, what? Why did you say the pictures then? Why not?
Because we're not like you, are we? We don't go on about it all the time.
2 weeks today?
There's always something cheery. It's like a big roundabout. There's always the gaps are all filled out across the year.
Your apprentice will finish too.
You'll have celebrity summit, won't you?
And they're saying that people are like planting blood as well. So I go to a crime scene. Everyone wears gloves now. You've got to be something wrong with you to wear gloves. And they'll have got blood from somewhere, and they'll just flick it. So they can't even use that now. Just like, yeah, we've got DNA, we can prove it was you, but can you?
So that's slightly disturbing, the last one. But that generally what we're seeing there, the most common auditory distraction is basically sitting there. You're trying to watch the telly, and somebody else is in your ear just chatting away at you. I think we're all familiar with that. Then the final part is when it's visual distraction. The ads are playing, but the visual attention is elsewhere. Now, let me show you this, because I think this is one of the most interesting aspects of this study and shows how critical, how powerful the auditory part of AV advertising is.
Take a walk on the wild side.
Did somebody take your teeth?
It's just a tickle. I'll try a sweet.
That's just a wee tickle.
Could be just.
Did someone say just eat?
Tom Ball Around Kids sponsors I'm a Celebrity.
I'm a celebrity.
These are radio treats.
What about Archie?
What about Archie? Archie. What about Archie?
Us reindeers like little nuggets too.
Yeah, of course you will.
I like my Willie Q, the sensational brand new album.
I don't get the point of adverts nowadays, because as soon as adverts come on, we're all on his phone anyway, aren't we? So you don't really see adverts, do you?
It's just absolutely perfect. He couldn't have given it to us any better. So, even from his own point of view, these ads are a waste of money. We're not paying attention to him. Yet he's singing along with them. He knows all the words. You tell me that there's nothing going on there, that's not playing some kind of role, building some kind of resonance, some kind of mental availability, some kind of priming. So I think when it comes to attention, there's a really nice quote that came from Ali Good, and he said, it's not about getting all the attention and using it. It's about using all the attention you're getting. Ultimately, it's about creativity. It's about making really, really good advertising, engaging advertising that's going to draw people's attention. And even when they're not paying full attention, it's about having aspects to it that are still going to work, driving your brand into their memory. And I will leave the final word to Professor Anoseth. Attention is complicated. Thank you very much.